grab some water, if that's okay.
That's good.
Linda.
Oh, Carl. There it is.
Did you hire a new library person?
We just did 2 interviews.
Because they're doing work down there right now. Drywall or something? Putting a wall.
Yeah, there's office restructure, partitioning, I guess.
All right.
Okay, we will convene our work session.
Sure, I can sit by you. Sorry.
And this is a work session, and as board chair, I have asked Rena Rogers to facilitate this meeting primarily so that I can participate, just like the other commissioners, in the dialogue and so forth, and not have to worry about facilitating the meeting. So welcome, everyone, and I'll turn it over to our interim administrator.
Thank you. So, in any kind of a work group or where we're trying to get something done, I like to have sort of rules of engagement. You know, how we proceed, how we make decisions, how we do other things. And as I think everybody knows, we have adopted by the board speak your piece, and as a way to keep things civil. And so I think in this particular thing, we're going to try and hear all the voices that we can. And it's going to be really important for people to try to listen to what other people are saying, even if you disagree with them, rather than just planning on the next thing that you want to say. We're going to try and structure it in a way that everybody has an opportunity to speak. I'm sorry. Did somebody say something?
I heard whispering.
I thought somebody was asking you a question.
I was just asking if this meeting is being streamed.
It is being streamed,
Thank
actually. You just keep those things in front of you. I think we're all here in the same boat together, right? Called Cook County. So the best thing we can do is try to find a solution that works for everybody. And that's not one side or the other. It's collectively, how do we make this work for all of us? So we're going to try and drive to that today a little bit. I have something there, something I call a rule of 2. So that when we get more into discussion, I'm going to ask that we try to make sure, and I'll try to monitor it, but you can all help me as well, that one person doesn't speak more than 2 times before everyone else has had a chance to weigh in on something, so that we don't get people dominating the conversation. Is there any other kind of rule or guideline that anybody else would like to bring to this? Or is that good? Okay. So my understanding of the purpose of this meeting, so this is a chance to weigh in. Yes, Molly?
Sorry to interrupt. I can't see who's at the table. Would you mind going around and saying who's there?
I would certainly do that. To your right is Brady, over that direction. Linda Jurek is next to him.
Hi, Molly.
And then Jim Boyd. Back on the back row back there is Heidi, Dave, Mills, and Myron. Bob Thompson, and then Commissioner Storley. Jenny's to my right, over here. Okay. Right, over there. All right. So, all right, and that's of course Molly's there, and I'm glad she's able to join us on her family vacation time. So my understanding is that the purpose of this meeting is to draft a recommendation about a new short-term rental classification for Senator Bach, and that it's supported by the board and the business community. Is that accurate, or is there something else on this one?
That's not what I thought we were doing. I thought we were doing a resolution to support what they'd already worked out.
It's a recommendation for, and it can be in a resolution form, but, and or not. I think it probably would be in a resolution form for the board.
Because this is a resolution.
It is.
So are we not doing this now?
We are not doing it right away. We are going to get to that. But there's some other things I'd like to talk about before we.
Sorry, I asked
do that.
multiple questions, but I'm really confused about what we're doing.
So the end result is to come up with an approach that we all agree on to provide to Senator Bach to, as our recommendation from Cook County, what's good for all of us, that he can take forward and hopefully have some legislation. And I see Jim nodding. Is that what everybody else thinks of? Good. Good. So that's the purpose of the meeting. So I believe in establishing purpose. I think it's a good place to start, otherwise we're just exchanging ideas. So what I want everybody to think about, and then I'm going to give you all a chance to tell me your top thing, is what is the one thing that each one of you must absolutely be reflected in the final draft? What's the one thing you care most about? And this item should be like a deal breaker. So if that is not reflected in the final outcome, you can't support it. That's the level I'm talking about here, okay? So everybody gets a chance. I'm gonna ask everybody, and we're gonna put them up here. And then that will be like our guidelines. So whenever any ideas are proposed, where somebody says, well, I want this wording in a resolution, we'll look at the list and say, how does it measure up? Is there anybody here that is doing that? We'll just see how that goes. You know, if that becomes too onerous, we'll try that. But I think that way, without arguing, we have a kind of a benchmark of a way of what we all care about that we can keep visible in front of us. Okay, good? You good with that? Okay.
I'm typically pretty, it's one thing is very difficult for me.
Well, after everybody gives me one, and you see what's on everybody's list, I will open it up again to see if there's anything else that we should consider.
Like the public does, you can have mine.
All right. So, I'm gonna start, who should I start with? Jim, I'm gonna start with you, because I know you've been thinking about this a lot. What would you like more than anything else to see reflected in this?
Policy proposal we can all agree to that we believe serves the best interest of the people of Cook County on the issue of a short-term rental tax classification.
Serves the best interest of Cook County?
Yes.
I'm gonna be brief. Okay, of the people of Cook County, I think you said, okay. All right. What's your name?
Fair.
It's gotta be fair? Fair to who? Everyone?
Everybody.
Okay.
That's gonna make it hard to pass anything.
Maybe or maybe not, but, I mean, clearly that's what we're trying to do, right? So,
Something that's data-driven.
data-driven.
A data-driven decision.
Myron?
I think it's been said in the first two, but I'm specifically concerned about any impact they would have on our homestead property owners and their share of the tax burden. It needs to be favorable. How much, I don't know.
I guess my main concern is to eliminate the resources on the assessor's office for the most part.
The burden.
Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Well, essentially clarifying it so there's not uncertainty, is it this class or this class, and just saying it's this class. Something where we don't have to do the 183-day test and question each user, you know.
So
But essentially clarifying the use in a classification, in a
Clarifying
single classification,
the
yeah.
use, so that it's more objective, right?
Right,
Okay.
yeah, if we do clarify the use, then it would eliminate some resources, so.
So he stole my
Oh, did he?
Well, would a new classification serve these purposes is what I
Okay, so you're questioning whether we even need a new classification?
would, but would it serve?
Oh, okay,
What would it serve?
okay,
So it's kind of like what Bob said.
okay. Molly? You got an idea of what you would like to see?
Well, I would echo what, who was it who first, it was Jim Boyd who first said it needs to serve the best interests of the people of Cook County, not one category of people. But as an attorney, I need to make sure that this is not an arbitrary action, right? That it's based on some good reasoning.
Okay. Madam Jurek?
Does Brady get to go?
Yeah, no, okay. You know, Brady is always the most, he's the king, so we always have to do that.
Just, I want to reemphasize that I'm here as a representative for tourism and as the executive director of Visico County, so that has to be very clear always, just for the sake of my
Sure.
position with my board. So I will go right back to always the mission and vision of Visit Cook County, which is to enhance and grow a sustainable tourism economy. And when I say that, the next part of that would be to solve and get at the solutions for this type of issue. And it's broad, so it has to be sustainable for all. So the best interests of people of Cook County, but really the best interests of our lodging properties, all of them. I mean, I would love to reach some great consensus
Okay.
that doesn't harm one over the other. Sustainability.
Lodging owners, lodging properties owners?
Lodging properties.
All right, Brady, what have you got? Anything new?
No, nothing beyond that yet. I
Okay.
didn't come here thinking about that, so.
All right. I have one too, and mine is, I hope that we can come up with something that is, that would be taken seriously in St. Paul. That it isn't so, it isn't something that would be knocked down by a group, another group of lobbyists, the assessors or the hotel owners or whoever, right? So that we present something that has a chance of being adopted. So, otherwise, we could go home now and start a weekend, really. Okay. This is your chance. If you had another thought, Mr. Mills.
Well, to be honest, they were very well communicated by the other members of the group. So all my other thoughts, to be honest.
So now, anybody else, anything you want to add to this?
I just want to add that this is really, really complicated. And as we often do in Cook County, we isolate ourselves, I think, sometimes on some of our, achievements and issues. We, feel like we're the only ones. And with this issue, it can be replicated in the state, and this is, I'm getting there, promise.
No, I'm just going to drink water.
It can be replicated in the state, but, when you go down to, say, the metro, there's a lot of commercial hotel properties. It really gets impactful when you throw in our number of resort properties with HOAs and then the standalone vacation rentals. And so emphasizing that it's really complicated, and I think it's really okay for us to be able to say, you know what, I don't get it. I have to take the recommendations from somebody who really does. There's been a tremendous amount of energy and education and conversation. And so staying in our lane, I guess, would be really important too. Stick with the tasks that we have at hand and just know that. It's okay, Ginny, if you say at some point, whoa, 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 I do not know tax law, this is, give it to me in the basic of basic forms, because we could sit here for the weekend,
Right.
if we're all
Oh,
gonna get to the
absolutely.
level.
I've been on a fast learning curve on this.
So
I-
my suggestion to the group then would be, don't say things if you're not 100% sure. You know, that's gonna be really important, so
So,
honest, transparent information sharing is what I'm at.
right, and, Brady and Bob and Molly are largely here to be experts and talk about and give us feedback or data when we need it about, what are impacts, so that we can, if we propose X, what's the impact of that on this group or that group? So hopefully that's their main role in here, although they can have an opinion. Okay, so anything else that needs to be on this list?
Can I ask a question? Can we, would it be helpful, can we specify something that we don't care that much about?
We can do that.
The language in the resolution, it's your draft, do with the language as you wish to make you comfortable. We're not wedded to any of this. We were trying to draft something that would suit you.
As a leading document.
And you know what, I just want to say, I appreciate it. Okay, seriously, from what I said, I appreciate it, because it's a start, right?
Yeah.
And once you start, you have something you can work with and you can go. So we're gonna go through it. We can, that's the next part, we'll go through it with a lens of what's important to people and see how that weighs out.
Yeah.
So the next question, is there anything that's on this list that somebody doesn't like or can't live with? Or can we agree to this list as a measuring stick?
The one that causes me concern is yours, and that is that we must agree on something that will be acceptable in St. Paul. Somehow I would like to see that point made in a way that allows for the fact that what we agree on here will change when it hits St. Paul, but we don't have to try to anticipate what they will like. What we're trying to do is our best job of putting forward what works for us, understanding that they're going to have their own point of view and that we're going to be talking to them a lot as well.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fine, and I can take that off. I was trying to have a realistic kind of a measurement on there, but, because we could put something out there that's.
Oh, totally wacko.
Right.
Yeah.
But we can certainly either remove it if you want to.
No, I just.
Or just
the
kind of
stipulation.
understand it in that box.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So one other thing that I like to keep track of in these conversations, where people get really emotional sometimes, and almost everybody gets emotional when the money's involved, is assumptions. Assumptions, as a project manager, assumptions were always those places where all my risk was found. And it's where almost all the time people end up disagreeing, because assumptions are dangerous because generally they have one foot in truth. But they need to be validated, and we need to, when somebody makes a statement, or how can we back it up? How can we make it as truthful as possible? So one of the things I'm going to try to keep track of is when I hear an assumption, is write it down. And then we'll talk about it and say, how can we make that more factual and less of an assumption? Is that good for you? She's over here sending me love messages.
Oh my God, that is so awesome. I hate assumptions.
Assumptions are, they're
good.
After a while, you get to where you hear them. So I'm going to be listening for that. Okay, so now we get to move on, make a choice. Now we get to decide how. We have some choices. We can work through point by point the resolution that's in front of us, and as we wordsmith it or discuss it, we can measure it up against our purposes that we identified and try to revise it in that way to drive some agreement. We can look for assumptions and try to clean them up as we see them, or we can start from scratch. What's the mood of the group?
I'd like to start with the draft.
I think we could start with the draft, and I mean, if we feel like something is just unnecessary in general, we can eliminate it from the draft.
And then with the reminder of being able to say, I don't know what the heck you're talking about here, or, oh yeah, I kind of get it, this is feeling good. So allowing the time to educate as we go through. That's how I see it, our most efficient.
And I think we're looking for assumptions when we go through this as
Right.
well.
Assumptions and for places where we can tighten it up to make sure that it meets the purposes that it has identified. Do you have something?
Molly, I sent you the list that's on the wall that you can't see, that we're sticking to.
I can't hear you now, Molly.
Thank you.
Now we can.
Somebody's trying to break up ice dams on the roof of the building, so.
Oh, wow.
Well, there you go.
Worthy cause.
So I think, is anybody else have, Commissioner Stroh? Is that right? I like that. Okay. I think that's the most efficient way to do this. And I would add 2 points to that. One is we have a bunch of what I like to call whereases. The whereas is this, and whereas is that, and whereas is, I don't know what the plural of whereases are, but. There's kind of two groups of whereases. And the first group, you see them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 paragraphs. Those are background whereases. They're kind of how did we get here? And what are the fundamental things we're thinking about as we put this recommendation together. The next whereas is arguably where the meat of this discussion is at. I would like to take that one separately. Because the first ones are kind of background, and I want to make sure that we kind of march through this to make sure that we agree on the fundamental points that lead up to the actual solution. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. Well then, who's going to keep track of, April, can I get you to keep track of when somebody comes up with edits on something, then we'll make those changes on another document. So, okay? All right, we'll have April help us with that. So let's look at the first one. Anything over there, Molly? I see you thinking.
The first recital paragraph is what we're looking at?
Yep.
Okay, so the memo is described as directing county assessors to move short-term rental properties from seasonal residential would triple current property tax burdens. I'm not certain that that's an accurate representation of, because I'm not sure it would triple the burden on every property. And I would suggest that we use some language that we can support, which we could just broadly say will increase the tax burden, and if you want to call it drastic, or if you want to call it significant, something like that. Now, am I right, Mr. Thompson, that it would not triple the current property tax burden on every property?
Yeah, that's correct, and even going a step further back from there is that it's not all of these properties, it's the ones used primarily short-term. So the memo doesn't direct to move short-term rental properties, it directs to move primary use short-term rental to commercial.
Can I?
Sure. Go for it.
Not to get into too much of a debate about this, but the primary use thing is itself problematic. The assessor in Lake County, for example, has decided that what that memo directs is that they all be if you rent one day, you are commercial.
And that's why we're here, I think, is to try and get away from this making primary use determination.
Right, my point is that the memo is kind of confused and confusing. I don't have any big deal with changing it so that it's, well, what this paragraph tried to communicate was that it's easy for people to read this memo as saying this, and that some have, and we have gone through various stages here of coming down from that to landing on the 183 days and things like that. So,
And if I can add to that, the two words that I feel that we need to focus on in that is unaffected properties. Because they're not all affected and they're affected differently, so right away we get into the complicated situation that this is. So by keeping it the way it is, because it certainly is going to triple it, but it's only going to triple affected properties. So to me, that's our safety net in this first paragraph.
Yes, I guess.
I went along the lines of Molly and I changed that last sentence to would have a significant impact on all taxpayers. And significant might be too strong of a word, because some taxpayers it'll go down, some will go up.
on all seasonal residential taxpayers, or not all?
I just
tax-
changed where you have
It would.
would on your sentence, take triple out and change it to have a significant impact on all taxpayers.
All taxpayers, probably not.
No, at all.
If you change one tax classification, it has to balance, right? It has to balance out somewhere. Everybody's affected. This affects everybody.
Right.
Does it significantly affect everyone?
That's the only word I have a question on.
I wouldn't
I
say
don't
it
think so.
significantly affects, no.
No.
So
And some
then
of
we
the
would just say
affected,
have an impact on all taxpayers.
and some of the affected properties, it's not triple. I think we're all understanding that, right?
Yeah, but we could take significant out and just say it would have an impact on all taxpayers.
On the current, a significant effect on the property tax burdens on affected properties makes the most sense to me.
I like that.
I like that.
So-
Almost everyone is affected.
So can somebody read that back, and then we'll go around and make sure everybody's in agreement with that?
Well, I think, yeah, sorry, and Myron, I think you had something too, but.
Well, yeah, well, I'll say it if you want me to, but.
Do you want to?
I'm trying to be polite. Okay. I guess I'd also ask the question, are we going to get into this with more specificity later? So I'm just
Yes.
throwing it out. Is it necessary? Because it gets so complicated in the first statement, getting to your concern.
I don't think it gets, I don't look at it as a
Okay.
complicated statement. I look at it as a stage-setting statement. That memo of May 21st is what started this major snowball rolling. And I think without having a starting line, if you will, and I like what Molly said, so if it's like, would have a significant property tax burden on affected properties.
Okay.
And that's the truth. And we did, then in that statement, we're not saying, here's the affected properties. We know that some are
Sure.
going to be
Okay.
affected more.
Thank you, I think I understand that better. My concern was, there was action taken, but I think we're proposing something different as well.
So it would read.
And that varies in each county, whether, how they determine,
It
the
varies
use.
in each county by how even our assessors across the board have
Well, so
took
where
the
this
directive of the
first
memo.
statement is really relevant is that next year things could be further defined or clarified by revenue, or tax court could further define or clarify these things, so this is a valid statement.
Okay.
That it could also change.
Could I make a suggestion here, and I'll throw this out, you guys can see what you do with it. That the first whereas should be that the directive from the Department of Revenue has created uncertainty. And because they've left it up to different assessors to interpret it. And so
You're
there's,
combining the first two
And the
paragraphs.
third,
basically.
first and the third.
is that the third one? Okay, I'm sorry.
First, second, and
That'll
third,
teach me
yes.
not to read it.
Which might be okay.
Yeah.
I wonder if order is important here.
I agree, that's what I'm getting at.
It could be end of the first paragraph, semicolon, and then the Minnesota Department of Revenue, and then get to the third, and this has created, and that becomes the opening paragraph, which really sets the stage for the entire decision-making process.
That helps, thank you, for clarity. If
Get
we
rid of
agree-
some of our whereases.
So you're suggesting the third one be the first?
So
No, I
combining
think it
the
should
first
go
and
in the
third.
order that it is. I think it should
Yeah,
all
if we
be
can agree
combined,
on the
so-
terminology,
And
yeah.
so
You can see
to
a
a single
succession.
whereas
Yeah.
instead of three.
So it would be, can I take a stab? Whereas the Department of Revenue's May 21st, 2019 memo has created uncertainty over the appropriate property tax classification for short-term rental properties, has shaken the Cook County real estate market and threatened the Cook County economy.
I don't like that last
no.
language.
I think we have some assumptions
Yeah.
that we'll have to clean up there a little bit. But I think the sentence structure and combining those things together makes it flow a little bit better.
How about if you, for the sake of moving on, that third paragraph, as Jim edited it, could be not the whereas, but this has created uncertainty over the appropriate property tax classification for short-term rental property, period.
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
agreed.
It certainly has, and we might draw out that shaky real estate market and threatening of the economy somewhere further down, but.
Well, I think that, I mean, as our first reading of this, one of the things that gave us pause, what were those terms? And it's because they're very emotional terms, and they're not necessarily, if you had some statistics to back that up, I think then we could do that, but I think that shaking it, it's fearful language that's sort of something, I think. That's my opinion, but other people can weigh in. Yeah. Heidi?
Going back to the first paragraph, sorry, I'm gonna keep doing that. So, would have significant property tax burden on affected properties. Are we all in agreement with that language?
I don't know about significant,
Oh,
It's only on affected
Is it
properties. That's what
affected?
that word is for.
okay.
And
Because I wanna
tripling of
add-
tax, commercial tax, or taxes is significant
Yeah.
on affected properties.
Okay,
But it also, at the same time, just if it's an affected property, the tax isn't going to triple on all of those.
We're not using the word triple anymore.
Right, but
Yeah.
I guess we can-
So it may be significant on the affected properties. It will also affect other properties, so I want to add to that and impact all taxpayers. So that when this gets to St. Paul, they understand that this isn't a one-thing issue. This is a across-the-board issue. By
Good.
adjusting this, you're adjusting everyone.
if I could just add maybe to clarify, not taxpayers, but property taxpayers.
Okay.
Rena, I have a concern about this. I realize these are emotional terms. This is such a dynamic issue right now that up-to-date data on the impact that it has had would be very difficult to come by. But we have some data from the people who are in this business, so that Cascade Vacation Rental has already had, I believe, something in the neighborhood of a dozen properties pull out of the rental market. They have put a couple of properties up for sale because of the unpredictability of the impact this will have on their market value and their use. So I think that I think that it's something along those lines is justified.
Sure.
Can we?
But can we restate it maybe differently, like, I don't know.
Maybe it is still the threat to the Cook County economy
Or-
without the shake and
Or
pace.
perhaps there are concerns from real estate owners that this uncertainty has resulted in concerns being expressed, or?
You know, people pulling properties out of the rental market are not concerns.
Yep.
Those are actions.
So maybe we actually say that, rather than say.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Molly.
I was going to suggest that we say something has the potential to seriously disturb the real estate market. And then I was thinking, if you would like to, you could reference that there already has been some evidence that this will disturb or seriously disturb the real estate market, which in Cook County is driven in a significant way by rental properties. So instead of saying it is happening, which we can't really prove, we can say there is some evidence that it will happen, or.
Well, all due respect, I think we can.
We can prove it.
Because about 80% of the standalone home and cabin properties in Cook County are managed by one company. And they're telling us that they've had in the neighborhood of 12 properties already, even though this isn't even resolved, pull out of the market.
I was told that all of Lee County's properties pulled out already.
Well, and that's, I don't know how germane that is, but that shows the effect of moving them all to commercial.
Right.
But
And perhaps that's what needs to be stated. The uncertainty, or the uncertainty from this directive
Is causing people.
is causing already people to leave the short-term rental
Market.
It's hard for me to do this and think of words at the same time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I like that, well, I like that word better. I mean, I like how that was said better, to put that in the first line.
And it's true, it's not an assumption.
Yeah.
so how did you say that?
Say it again, Bobby, to say that again. Somebody
He says
needs to
has created
Can I
uncertainty
take
for the short-term rental market. People have already withdrawn from the short-term
Right,
rental market.
the impact of this directive.
And the uncertainty has caused people to pull out.
The short-term rental market.
That's a factual statement.
Yeah.
It's factual, it's less emotional, but factual. It can have the same impact. You good with that, Molly?
I'm good with that. The next question, though, is why do we care that people are pulling out of the short-term rental? I'm not saying I
Sure.
don't care. I'm saying we need to connect that to the Cook County, best interests of Cook County residents.
Okay, and that's where,
It's affecting property values or something like that.
it's something in the neighborhood of half of the lodging properties in Cook County are in this group. And so when you start pulling out, and you don't know how far it's going to go, what the ultimate impact will be on the numbers.
It's less lodging for visitors.
Yeah.
Less lodging and less jobs.
Yeah,
That's really the
exactly,
biggest concern.
and when you have an economy that is more than 80%, it, by definition, the most tourism-centric economy in the state of Minnesota, that's why we're worried. That's why it says threatens the Cook County economy. That's a shorthand for a whole lot of stuff.
Right, but
That are not all assumptions, by the way.
So I think if we can write something that says, they wrote something that has a lot of, interpretation in it, and a lot of unknowns in it, which is, I think, what we've already done, it has this impact. One of the impacts we're seeing is that people are already, because of the uncertainty, are already starting to move
Right.
out of this rental pool, and that has an impact on tourism or on lodging capacity or whatever, and we just kind of do this, and which ultimately has a job on or
Impact on
can
our job
impact
market.
on jobs and what. So we have sort of a line that says, this leads to this, leads to this.
Leads to this.
That's
It's
great.
kind of
That would be great.
And just as you're concerned that we not overstate it, I'm concerned that we not understate it either. So if we can get something that gets at the truth of it, we're good. Right?
Agreed. I agree. So
As
did
a
somebody get all that?
politician, when I read wordy things that say shaken to the core, then I just put it down and I'm done reading it. I would like just to stick to facts and also make sure that they understand.
Where are you seeing
the
shaken to
importance.
the core?
Well, just when you put words in there, shaken
Well,
and,
we don't need to go there because we're moving forward from
I
that.
know we are, but I'm just saying, he says it needs to be stronger and just, I want us to be careful in us being stronger in our language.
So I'm gonna be true to my rule of two for a moment and give some other people a chance to just weigh in. Dave, you've been sitting over there being thoughtful. Have you got any thoughts about the direction we're going with this?
I think we're going in a good direction. Yeah, it's just a matter of getting the language wrapped up. I'm trying to type my own version just because I'm not scratching things out as we go, and that'll just be cleaner for me. So, but yeah, I think we need to express that it has created uncertainty in the short-term rental market. I think we need to express that the short-term rental market is a significant part of Cook County's economy. And what was the next? There was a third one too. And that maybe that we have seen the impacts already.
In a small sample.
Right, or something to that effect. Is that
We have
where we're at?
indications to support that.
Right. Recent.
Has anybody got this down where we can read it?
Well, that's what I started on.
All right.
Don't hold your breath.
Well, maybe it'd be helpful if you start up here.
I could do that.
Dry erase board.
And then we just fill in.
I think we have a dry erase board back yonder.
County, they have the TV as their
Up
dry
there?
erase board.
Rena, isn't the board behind that paper dry erase?
It is.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Okay. Whereas.
We got that part right, Jim.
Can I tell you that the reason that we started with the resolution is because Tom just used that word specifically, so that,
Right.
but he might accept something else, but that's why we picked it out, is he used the word.
I think resolution is fine.
Okay.
I mean, I think that can come as it's coming as a recommendation from the board. I think it's fine.
Okay.
But I think, some one option. I
Yeah.
don't think it's, It's what we're working with, so I'm good with it. And, a resolution in my head, anyway, does this job of laying out the case that should be really tied to the solution. It should be tied, the case you lay out should pick up these points. So if we have any whereases that aren't addressing some of these things, then we should probably think about adding them or adding something in. And they should lead to whatever you're proposing. I mean, it should be a logical, therefore, blah.
Right.
So, yeah. So tell me what you want me to write up here, because I can't memorize all that. Anybody.
Rather than rewrite everything,
Right.
I would make the suggestion that you take like that first whereases
Uh-huh.
and just note the change, which was, would have a significant property.
After the 3-1 would have.
So, ... would have a significant property tax burden on affected properties.
A significant tax.
Property tax burden on affected properties.
And then you can stop, because that was the only change.
And may I?
Sure, go ahead.
You don't have to write this until we talk about it, but I just have 3 short clauses thus far. Whereas the DOR's memo has created uncertainty in the short-term rental market, whereas the short-term rental market is a significant part of Cook County's tourism economy, whereas tourism is the single largest part of Cook County's economy. And then that's that. And then that's that.
I heard it.
I didn't know if that was a bad.
No, that's a good.
So those would be the first 3 to clarify.
Yeah, to
That's
some.
adding whereases.
Sure is.
We were getting
But the
rid of
shorter
whereases.
whereases, does that count for anything?
Yes, it does.
How about just
But
one
that's the
whereas?
idea of the logic, build the case, and then just somehow we got to throw in. I mean, the significance of it, I guess. Maybe that alone does, but
Do you think we need to note in here somewhere that the reason we're even here is because the lodging environment has changed in recent years? I mean, with VRBOs, and so the classification system of revenue has not, to this point, really, doesn't have an adequate classification to address this. Hasn't, and so it's been trying to fit it in, you know, the commercial or this or whatever.
Tom Bach's words, I like the way he said it. He said that the Minnesota property tax system did not anticipate or contemplate, yeah, that was the word. He said it did not contemplate renting seasonal properties.
That's.
So, I mean, I think that for the most part, any expert in property taxation would agree with that statement.
I like that.
I mean, it's kind of foundational. Yes,
Well,
Jim?
I like where you were going. There's one piece that doesn't fit,
Okay.
and that is that we've had the condominiums and townhomes at Sea Villa, Bluefin, Caribou Highland. Some of those have existed for half a century, and they've always been taxed at this rate.
Seasonal rent.
Yeah, or its predecessor. I don't know if it was called that, but they've always, it wasn't something they asked for, it was what they were assigned. It's apparently the best home for them. So that piece, what stimulated all of this was the other, we have two buckets. We've got those and then we've got the standalone cabins and homes.
Mm-hmm.
The growth in that, the emergence of that as a consumer choice is what stimulated this. But we can't forget the other piece. It's important to us.
So, I'm just gonna ask you a question, and you guys don't throw anything at me, okay? But, if you have two cabins side by side, one is, I use it with my family 5 weekends a summer, and that's it. And the other one, next door to it, I use it with my family 5 weekends a week, but I also rent it out. There's a commercial piece to the other one. Should they be in the same bucket?
I don't think anybody's arguing that they should be.
Okay, so there needs to be this other mixed-use classification. We're all driving to that. I just want to make sure that we are all driving to that first. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get back to the whereas. I mean, that seemed fundamental, so I just want to clarify. Who's got whereas? Molly? I see you leaning in.
You seem to be cold.
I think it's cold in
About
here.
whether we need a new classification for multi-use like this. I wonder if we want to or need to get that specific even, or if we're just asking the legislature to direct the Department of Revenue to come up with a better solution. Because maybe the seasonal rent class needs to be defined differently, or that's a stronger argument. That's an easier piece of legislation to get passed, and that solves our problem too. That's one of my general overall questions with this proposal is, do we need to, or should we be getting this specific, or should we just be stating that we need a solution that addresses these concerns?
I think that we feel like there's a timeline because of that directive.
DOR isn't, I mean, you could tell Department of Revenue or the legislature you want something to happen, but Tom Box made it clear he doesn't want to come up with a solution. He wants us to come up with a solution. Department of Revenue's solution is changing the commercial.
I think I talked to you and taken a crack at that seasonal classification. Is it bigger? That opens a wider issue to go right into the statute on that.
Well, yeah,
As
I mean, if you're
opposed
trying
to
to
creating a new class.
If you're trying to modify an existing class, there's so many different things that could result in that.
Can I answer Molly too? Molly, that was my position from the very start, was that this is a state issue and the leadership should be coming from St. Paul, and there's no way on God's green earth that Cook County, this little place in northeast Minnesota, should be trying to fashion a policy for all of the state of Minnesota. So we were really surprised, I think all of us in the room, when we go to Evelyn and talk to Tom and Rob after an IRRB meeting, and Tom says, don't bring us your problem, bring us your solution. And we pressed him on that. And what he was basically saying is, A, that within the Association of Assessors, they are looking to the research that Bob has done on this for leadership. And we have been talking about, at least some of us have been living this for 2 years. And the statewide associations, like Hospitality Minnesota and others, are so conflicted internally. They have people all over the sides, both triple, quadruple sides of this. They can't leave. And therefore, they're looking to Cook County to indeed provide a solution, and he stipulated, that works for Cook County, and bring it to us, and we'll go forward from there. That was what he told us. So it surprised me too, because I was asking the same exact question.
Can't hear you, Molly. We can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Follow-up question then. Where did the 4CC, or it's no longer, yeah, it is 4CC1. Where did all of that language come from? Who drafted that originally? That's a piece of information that I have. Or who drafted this proposal? Who came up with
One more
it?
time?
Sure.
Sorry.
1.25%.
We came back from the meeting in Evelyn and met with Bob on January 6th for the purpose of using his technical expertise to try to develop a proposal that would solve this issue. And that's where the 4CC1 came from.
And so I actually still have, it's on my flash drive right here. What I had written up was essentially right after 4C1, which is the seasonal resort class, a 4CC class, which basically said 1 and 2 unit short-term rental properties found to be advertised in the year preceding the assessment date, which is very simple, and I think it addresses the mixed use. Now, where the rate gets set, that's not something I really wanted to dabble in, but I gave an example of 2 different rates and where they would land in the tax system. But that was what I had brought to the meeting that day, and from there, it evolved to separating out the resorts and the standalones. It evolved to including a primary use test still with a 183-day threshold. So essentially what I read out of this is that they would go back to seasonal rec, what they were before, and if they were rented more than 183 days, then they would be classified as a short-term rental. But that doesn't seem to make sense as far as if you're creating a class, you're creating it for the use. You're not creating it for, I mean, I guess you could create that class and say it's if it's over 183 days, but I don't see that getting support from assessors.
Well, it seems very simple to use the class, the new class, if a permit is pulled.
Right, I mean, a lot of counties and cities have the permits, I mean.
That's short-term rental permit.
And assessors always have the obligation to identify how a property is used. I mean, that's just something we're tasked with. That's not going above and beyond what our normal duties are. But I think that what happened is on the 6th, a simple, somewhat relatively simple solution was presented, and it was tweaked and modified and basically just whittled away to where there really isn't going to be a change in the way they're taxed unless they're rented over 180 days.
So I just want to level set the 183 days. That was something Bob and Molly and I came up with in the short term, only to respond to the Department of Revenue to keep us out of tax court. It was literally that, until the revenue came up with how they were going to classify these properties. The 183, and I'm skipping ahead, but I just want to say it gives us a problem from the point of view of impact on our assessor's office. And that would likely also be something that assessors would say no to.
Yeah, I think our association.
It needs to be a more simple definition than that, and one that doesn't have to be, tested or somebody out checking it or something like that.
Do you see a problem, or this is a general question for everybody, do you see a problem with having that class change triggered by the permit, the short-term rental permit?
I
Is
think
that
I'll-
excluding or including too many, or what, how is that?
No, I think a lot of counties would utilize, if they have a permitting system, that would be their start. You know, they would say, okay, all these we know are rented because they're pulling permits to rent them. But then you might have some that don't get permits, and, you know, just like in land services, when they're gonna be trying to identify those properties, so will the assessor's office. So might even be some data sharing between the two offices, but the identifying the properties that are used short-term isn't the big problem.
I'm sorry.
I'm just curious, and I'm curious, from the assessors and the state assessor group, is it the responsibility to write tax law?
Absolutely not. I've been told to stay away from this thing with 200 foot.
So I'm hanging on that one a little bit, like, I think it would be wise for us and wise to help us, let us help Bob back away from this whole writing of it
Yeah.
and make it our resolution as a county.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'd be very careful in saying.
That's why I gave two different rates and basically just handed it off, and like I say, it kind of changed as it went along after
Right,
that.
so,
That's not to say, however, that the assessors, they have they have kind of their own lobby group through Association of Minnesota, right? That they might not say to their legislators, we don't support this.
Yeah.
So that's not to say that they won't take that kind of stand.
Well, and Rena, I'd like to comment on that. It's more likely that the assessors would testify if they oppose something. I mean, if they have it in their mission or in their position statement that they are opposed to something and something comes through, they will go down and send somebody to testify and say, we don't like this idea. But it's probably gonna be harder to get enough people in the association to say, we support this fixes a big problem. But they can. And I've talked to, legislative chair, I've talked to members of the legislative committee, and they said, I'm very likely going to be down there testifying this session. So, and I even said to Mark, he's the chair of the legislative committee, I said, what if Cook County puts forth a resolution that's, creating a new class and all these things that MAO has kind of said they really don't like the idea of. And he said, no, that's no problem. He said, the association's not gonna tell you not to do something like that. So, well, it does kind of seem like, I can get myself into a sticky situation where if I say, oh, I support this tax rate and this classification on these properties, and then something different results from the Department of Revenue or the legislator, then everyone in the community gets to point the finger at me and say, well, you said this isn't fair. So that's where I get myself in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're getting off topic a little bit. So
Yeah. Well, I think, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but we'll get there, I'm sure. But I really think that it might be appropriate for us to be very careful about that statement about the 183-day. I think that's been brought up. And just stay away from that if possible, because we could propose something that would be more general. Because it appears to me from what I'm hearing that the 183-day primary use test is not going to prevail.
Well,
It's not logical that it would, but we did that for other reasons.
and that's
So
an assumption, but there are a lot of counties doing it differently, so
So
right now, 5 days and whatever. So.
We use the 183 days to determine which of two uses it is. If you create a new class, that's its use. There is no two uses.
Right.
That's my point of view.
Good.
And to respond to you, two things about the 183 days. One, I missed totally that it was a temporary thing, and that you actually didn't even intend that it go into actual effect when Bob will be reclassifying properties, as he must, next January, out of the residential non-home. I thought that's where you intended to go. And the one reason that we had a real problem with that was that I talked about the two buckets. The bucket with the condominiums and townhomes, those properties, I'm told, are renting now for 250 to 220 days a year. And pulling them back to 183 is cutting off basically a third of their income production, and that is a real problem. especially
And
when,
it's taking them out of the rental pool because they'll.
sorry.
Yes, Molly?
So I wouldn't get hung up on the 183 days.
Right.
We missed that you didn't intend for it to be the solution.
And if I could-
We were trying to address this directive that they gave us to figure out primary use. And then we know that it was going to be addressed hopefully in this legislative session to get a better classification. But in the short term, we had to do something with those properties. And so we said, what's the most objective way to do primary use more than half the year,
Yeah.
right? But it's not a good solution going forward. So I just wanted to be.
Well,
So
and to further
we could
clarify-
eliminate this as part of it. I mean, it seems like it creates a lot of confusion if we leave this in there.
Well, we'll get to that later.
Okay.
We'll probably take it out. I mean, we want to get.
That's what I was gonna say, can we get back to?
Yeah,
what
let's
they
get
are?
back to the whereases, the background whereases.
So where are we?
Who's got a recent list? I got lost.
Well, I didn't get much further, but whereas the Department of Revenue's memo has created uncertainty in the short-term rental market, whereas the short-term rental market is a significant part of Cook County's tourism economy, whereas tourism is the single largest part of Cook County's economy, whereas the Cook County Board wishes to find a solution that is fair for all property tax owners. And then the next one is going to be whereas the Cook County Board and Chamber of Commerce, yes.
I'm wondering, and I'll just throw this out for discussion purposes, if we need a whereas that says, whereas the current classification structure isn't adequate.
Yep.
You know, because either it puts people into something that increases their tax burden a lot, or on the other hand, it doesn't kind of reflect the fact that they're using this in a mixed use way. Kind of something that says, that's why we're asking for something new.
Can we just put whereas, the fourth whereas in where Dave's at right now?
Whereas the current Minnesota property tax system did not contemplate the new short-term rental market.
Or, yeah, or the other we should have.
Well, no, it didn't contemplate the rental of seasonal cabins.
Okay.
That's more accurate.
Okay.
Seasonal cabins and
Or homes. Yeah, but leave out, that allows for
Yep,
the unstated distinction of the
Mhm.
condominiums.
right.
Which is
Seasonal.
important.
I'm sorry, can you elaborate a little bit? I'm trying to multitask.
Sorry, no, I wasn't adding anything, I
Oh.
was just saying it was a good distinction.
Oh, okay, thank you, okay. So whereas the current Minnesota property tax system did not contemplate the rental of seasonal
Short-term rental of seasonal cabins and homes.
Short-term. Seasonal cabins.
Do we want to say seasonal?
Well, they were in the seasonal rec category, so that's a term of art, really.
Maybe it should not be seasonal. And that's why seasonal, I mean,
You
because,
could say
because
residential.
some of these are.
There you go.
Residential.
Residential.
Because some of them are seasonal cabins, but some of them are residential homes that are being used that way, like in Grand Marais. They're being used all year round, not seasonal.
Mhm.
Is that clear or not?
I think just saying the residential, the short-term rental of residential structures.
I like that.
Yeah.
Or just properties,
Yeah.
properties,
Properties.
residential
Short-
properties.
Short-term rental.
Well, the tax
Residential.
system did anticipate short-term rental of properties, and that's called a hotel and commercial.
That's not helpful, Bob.
I know.
Wait,
If
no,
you wanna word it, I
no,
would say
short-term,
residential.
the short-term rental of residential properties.
Right.
Yeah, that's, does that
Right.
trigger anything for properties?
I'm triggered.
All right, well,
I'm woke.
let's read what we got again, see where we go next. We'll go back to this.
Okay, we have the first sentence from the first paragraph up there. Then we go to what Dave said,
Yes?
second whereas. impact? Department of Revenue?
I don't know if we kept the first sentence. I thought we were just going with what Dave has.
Yeah, I was trying to simplify everything, so that was where I started, but I don't have a,
Go for it.
huh? No, I mean, so far, so the only thing I've added so far, we did the first, should I start at the beginning?
Yes.
In the beginning.
Yeah, whereas the Department of Revenue's memo has created uncertainty in the short-term rental market, whereas the short-term rental market is a significant part of Cook County's tourism economy, whereas tourism is the single largest part of Cook County's economy, whereas the current Minnesota property tax, I didn't put in system, did not contemplate the short-term rental of residential properties, whereas the Cook County Board wishes to find a solution that is fair for all property tax owners.
I'm wondering if we should stick in this second paragraph, which I like very much. Whereas the Minnesota Department of Revenue has indicated they will not take further action to clarify.
I thought that'd just stir the pot.
I think it's an important one, because what they've done is put a directive out there that creates inconsistencies across counties. And maybe that's,
And I'm not sure that it stirs the pot, and I don't know that all the legislators looking at this know that history. So they need to know it.
I think it's important.
I do too.
Okay,
It
where?
calls the legislature to act.
No, but where are we sticking it?
Right after.
right after
That's your
the,
end of your whereases.
The, before the fair for all?
I think it follows somewhere close to where
Yeah,
the
put
Department
it
of
there.
Revenue gave a directive, and this is what, they gave a directive.
I think it should be in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, right after the.
When you re-edit this, you might find that it belongs better somewhere else, but just make sure
Stick
it's
it
in there
in,
for now.
okay.
Yeah.
I'd say
That's
either
good.
first
I
or
don't
second
think
statement.
That's pointing the finger too much.
Well, that's what I was wondering, was, because I didn't want to make, I'm looking for solutions, not, but we need to identify the
But-
problem,
but
you know?
it is a problem,
Right.
right? Because every county's doing it different,
They need to be nudged.
and that's not consistency, and that's where the Department of Revenue should be
Easier, is it
driving.
easier for you
And
to
they've
type
left,
in
and
here?
part of the uncertainty that we have here
Well,
is because of
About
that.
the,
I can tell you right now that it had come up in a couple of meetings, and somebody has said that, why isn't there further clarification coming out? And the response was, be careful what you wish for. So the reality is there, that they could issue a memo and say, change them all to commercial then.
They could, and that would have us right now in the legislature arguing that that was bad.
Right. Uh-huh. I think they have created a problem, and I think that's important, whereas, point out to our legislators. I do.
how about whereas the Department of Revenue has
Blessed are the
indicated
peacemakers.
no further, what's that?
I said, blessed are the peacemakers.
The Department of Revenue has indicated there will be no further, let me think, please.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
stick it in the way
following
they
you.
have it for right now, because
Okay.
I
Well,
think it's.
just so everyone is aware, there is a survey coming out from the Department of Revenue to all county assessors next week, or the next week. And they're going to ask, how were they classified before? How many are you going to be changing? How did you make your primary use determination? So they are looking at this a little closer. And I think they're aware that there's concern with inconsistency.
That's encouraging.
Well,
And
maybe we
news
should
to
be more
me.
discouraging.
Maybe we should
Depends on
just-
what side of the fence you land
Maybe-
on and
Oh,
what the direction evolves to.
Could we just
can get
state
worse.
something in regards to whereas the Minnesota Department of Revenue has created inconsistencies in the interpretation?
How about something that just says, I can see why we don't want to get into a micro-rating contest with the Department of Revenue, but how about we just said something, whereas the Minnesota Department of Revenue has given wide latitude to county assessors in making ultimate determinations.
Primary use determination.
Or something like that.
I
that's
like that better.
good, that's good.
Avoid the
Yep.
in-your-face kind of thing.
Yeah, saying that you're not providing clarification, just say that you've given broad, wide latitude.
So we have, if you recall, after the memo came out, there were people who said it's really not a directive, it's just advice. And that kind of got shut down, and then some of the subsequent missives from the Department of Revenue to Bob, which we've seen, really didn't want to go further than what the memo had gone. And so That's what we're trying to say.
Right. Well, I personally think we have a pretty good list of whereases. But I'd like us to come back and say, look at this list and make sure they're all addressed. So, we've talked about the real estate community and the impact on them, and the business community and the tourism community. So, I think that somewhere, whatever we're gonna propose as a rate or a method or however we go, that we may want to say, whereas, something to the effect of, I'm worried about this one.
Yeah.
That we don't propose something that has a negative impact, that we need a whereas that addresses, you know, something that doesn't have a negative impact across our whole tax base.
That was his next whereas.
Is it?
Yep.
Oh, you got it already?
Well, he had it, you guys
Well-
stopped him before he finished his whereas. The one that says, whereas the Cook County Board wishes to find a solution that is fair for all property tax owners.
Okay.
Property-
Maybe it's as simple as that.
But it's not property tax owner, right? It's a property
Payers.
tax payer.
Payer.
Property owners.
Property
I owe my
owner.
property tax until I give it to Brady.
Property owners, is that better?
Point taken. Okay, and are there anything, best interest, we've got this one, I think we haven't got to that yet. Fair to everybody, okay, I think we're good. I think we're good so far. Is this process working for you guys? You're good, okay. Just check it in.
No, I'm leaving.
Does anybody need a break? We've been at this
I
over
just
now.
did.
Seriously?
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun, Dave.
Sure does, every day.
Yeah. Is it brief break if anybody needs to, or we can keep going?
Let's go.
All this,
Just keep going?
Shoot for being out of here by 2:30.
I don't think that's happening.
I heard that he wants to go skiing.
Yeah, it's not happening.
so after that, whereas the Cook County Board wishes to find a solution that's fair for all property owners, whereas the Cook County Board has worked with both the Cook County Chamber of Commerce and Visit Cook County, now we're on to the solutions, right? We've identified the significance, we've identified the problem. Yeah? Yeah?
Sure, all right.
This is the easy part now, right?
This will be out of there.
In my eyes, it
Do
is.
you want to take you out of there?
Maybe we'll be out of here
Can you
by
take Visit Cook County out of there?
Yes, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
We have a divided
Gotcha.
opinion, so
I'm sure I can't imagine.
you are,
Thank you
Tourism.
for saying that. Thank you for
All right.
telling me.
It gives Linda a headache when she has to think about it.
I will say, though, I had a conference call today with the Minnesota Area Convention and Visitor Bureau and their two policymakers. And the two major initiatives they're bringing in this season is lodging tax in Plymouth and this. So it's at
It's
least,
everywhere.
it's everywhere. It's getting to the capital.
I had a call from southern Minnesota yesterday. There was a newspaper article that came out in Rochester yesterday.
Interesting.
I mean,
Just to
That
distract
writer-
from the city councilors
That writer
dubbing
clearly
them
didn't
pay.
know what he or she was talking about.
Right.
As you can see by a simple Google search, this is an issue in Colorado, it's here, towns, and it's kind of everywhere.
So are we hitting this big whereas? The proposal codifies the current Cook County 183
So
primary test?
let's not talk about it as a whereas, let's talk about what we want in that proposal, maybe as bullet points. So can we take the 183 off the
Yeah, I
table?
think we have
Okay.
to, I can't live with that.
And the reason I can't in this role is because of the impact on a very small assessor's office to be able to do a survey or monitor it. And in fact, we have no way to know that anybody's telling us the truth. So without a lot of oversight, we don't have the resources for that.
Could I just ask a question?
Sure, certainly.
In that regard, I guess, two questions. Would we want to seek or ask for clarification of the primary use test from, or do we want to
We
make a
have.
statement about it?
We've asked.
I don't think that, yeah, I think
That's
they've
not in
indicated
your-
they don't want to go any further than they have.
So, okay, I just want clarification. So you're saying, let's just not go there at all and try to keep some general language?
So if.
I guess primary use, we just
Right.
stay away from it because,
Right,
We
so.
don't-
pri-
Well, that's what
primary-
creating a new class is,
Primary use would be tied to commercial denial,
yeah, it's two uses.
as opposed to saying, we have a new class, which is just a mixed-use class. That's where somebody owns a house that they use, but they also rent their house.
so should we then introduce that at this point?
I
I think
think
that's-
that's what we're actually asking to do. is
Good,
to
okay,
create,
I want to
A new
understand.
class.
Yep.
But I'm getting for the language, I mean, this,
So create, I'm just gonna write some of these things down. Create a mixed use class, is that the right way to say that?
I think so.
All right.
Or create a class that addresses the mixed use,
What are-
just
yeah.
rewording.
Or how about create a short-term rental class?
How would you describe
Mm.
how would you describe the process of modifying an existing tax classification?
Difficult.
We tell
Okay.
Tom what to do and Tom does it. That would be the easy way.
It's not happening.
No.
Okay, so what I have is whereas the Cook County Board has worked with both the Cook County Chamber of well, I can't say that
Take
anymore.
both out.
With the Cook County Chamber of Commerce, whereas modifying existing tax classifications is difficult, I think we should say it a little differently, like to emphasize.
Well,
It has a lot of challenges.
Not
It-
desirable.
Yeah, or very challenging, or
maybe, or we need a classification that's more
Well, and
objective and
also-
less subjective.
make it
And
affirmative.
also modifying an existing class potentially opens up Pandora's box to all kinds of properties it wasn't intended to include.
Which was your issue with the 250 minutes.
so how about whereas modifying existing tax classifications has significant challenges?
Um,
And impacts.
Yeah.
We have a reason for wanting to not totally close the door on modifying an existing class.
Okay.
Not as a first tier priority, but
Yep.
as a possibility.
Mhm.
So could we go this way? At one point, as we've been discussing, Judy texted Tom Bach and asked him point blank, which would be easier, modifying an existing class or enacting a new class? He said the new class.
Yeah.
So could we say, whereas the challenge, I'm not wordsmithing this, whereas the challenge presented by tax policy on short-term rentals requires a new property tax classification, and leave out the negative statement about modifying an existing class.
Yeah.
It may never come to,
Right.
but
Saying it requires
I think it's
a new-
cleaning.
Yeah.
It's
cleaner.
Is that okay?
So my next,
I like
my
that.
next whereas was whereas the impact of short-term rental residential properties deserve a separate class of taxation.
That's great.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. class
Deserve or
a minute.
require, right?
Require is
It's
probably, yeah.
It's a mixed-use class. Do we need to define that class further, or did we already do that in that one whereas where we said the short-term, the seasonal cabin and properties that are used for.
The distinguishment would be rental leases of less than 30 days during the course of the year.
And advertised, perhaps. as
Yeah,
well.
advertised.
And that
So
repeats
create a
logic
short-term rental
statute.
class defined as rented for less than 30 days and advertised for short-term rental in the year preceding the designation.
Right, the assessment calendar, and that's what other classes, you know,
What
if
was
they're
it
looking.
advertised?
And advertised
Held
for
up.
short-term rental in the year preceding.
The assessment date.
30, yeah, you gotta throw in consecutive days, 30 consecutive.
Less than 30 consecutive days?
And that's what they got Bob on for the residential non-homestead.
In the year previous to the assessment?
Yeah.
All right. I like that. What's everybody else think? Let's go around. Does everybody agree with that? Yeah?
It says, create mixed-use class, short-term rental class, defined as rented less than 30 consecutive days, advertised as
Short-term rental.
short-term rental in year previous to assessment.
Can I wordsmith this? Rented for periods of less than 30 consecutive days. There needs to be
Yeah.
multiple periods in there. So rented for periods of less than 30 days.
Okay. What do you think, Mom? You want somebody to take a picture of this and send it to you?
No, I think I understand. I've been typing too. Does it matter that, I have to kind of think about this, but when we say mixed use, we mean it's used partially by the owners as a holiday home, and then it's partially used,
Yes.
I mean, this is how I started to define it in my head. It's partially rented to non-family, and then we go into 4 periods fewer than 30 consecutive days advertised as rental.
Yeah,
That kind of thing.
that's a good point, Molly, too, because some of these properties aren't used personally and they're only used as rentals. Are we trying to encompass all of the short-term
Yeah.
rentals?
It
or-
needs to be both of those things, not just ones that are just used, right?
Well, I don't know.
I'm with Bob on this, I think. I think I'm with Bob on this. I think the whole mixed-use thing
Maybe
is,
get rid of
is
that.
way too complicated. All we have to do is say, these are
Short-term
rented
rental.
as short-term rental and advertised as short-term rental. Forget the mixed use, we've gone way past
I agree
the
with
mixed
Jim.
use.
Yeah.
And it's renting or leasing of it for a continuous period of 30 days or more. That's from the lodging statute.
That's long-term, not
That's
short-term.
long-term.
That's long-term.
Yeah.
Short-term is the opposite.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's staying away from a mixed use. I mean, the mixed use is kind of how we got here, but
But we're-
you could very easily have investors buying them for one use and a
So-
short-term rental.
So if somebody is in a pool and it's being advertised and it's rented, no matter how much it's rented,
That's how it's
it goes
used.
to this class.
Yeah.
And we're all, everybody's good with that. Wow,
How
I'm
is
going
that
home
different?
now.
Right.
What, Molly?
How do we distinguish this from how a hotel is classed?
1 to 2 units.
Doesn't this, wouldn't a hotel, which rents its rooms, fall within this class under this
Well,
definition?
I guess we missed a big part of this is we're defining it as 1 or 2 units.
Which is different than the resorts.
Resort is 3 or more units.
If we do that, define it as 1 or 2, though, we need to ensure that we are clearly defining 3 or more as falling into the seasonal resort class.
That would
See,
be
seasonal
another-
resort has a whole bunch of other statutory requirements.
I know.
Recreational activities, the number of consecutive nights it's rented for, having 40% of lodging receipts in a 90-day window. You can't fix all the problems. I guarantee you we aren't gonna fix all the problems, but this is gonna cover 95% or more of them.
Well, can I ask a question then?
For fewer than 3 units.
Can we stay away from specifying the number of units if we defined it this way? Defined as a residential property rented for periods of less than 30 consecutive days?
Or can we call it standalone?
No, you couldn't do standalone, I mean,
And I thought we wanted to get
Well,
away
we
from
could do it, but-
residential properties.
I'm just concerned about it falling, some properties.
I
falling
think there
through the
would be
cracks.
some issues with calling it residential property, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. Those are the types of things that 2 days later you'd be like, oh, this is never gonna work, you know?
So
I've
what's
not
say?
I
thought
like
of
what
that.
Molly said, less than 3 units.
So if you, I don't know if you guys still have this sheet that Jim passed out with all the highlights. If you look at it, in almost every class where they break out number of units, it's 1 to 3 or 4 or more. If you look at, 4A, it's 4 plus, 4B is 1 to 3 units. That's a pretty common breakdown, and the resorts is 3 plus units. So I think that, like I say, I mean, you're never gonna encompass and solve the problem for all of these, but I think if you do 1 to 2 or even 1 to 3 units, you cover most of them.
I would be more comfortable with 1 to 3.
I think,
just
I
wanna
think
make
that's
cer-
fine.
I just want to make certain there aren't properties that fall in the cracks between.
yeah.
Yes.
Right.
I agree with
So
Jim.
fewer than 4 units.
Fewer
Yeah,
than four?
Less than 4.
1 to 3 would be as easily doable as 1 to 2. The only thing is now you get a little bit of overlap where people could argue they're one or the other class.
They can argue.
Say that again?
That's
So,
what- that's
let's
what
say,
people-
for example, Todd Miller, he's got 3 units on one property. Now, he's gonna look at seasonal resort, if he qualifies for that, it's a lower rate. Or is it this? But now, what happens if he's seasonal resort and crosses 250 days? Does he go to commercial the way the statute's written, or does he go to this? That's why having the 3 unit makes it complicated.
So I always think it's good to have a case that proves the rule, but sometimes when we go down to one particular thing, those
Well,
are
that-
the ones that need to end up in tax court anyway.
I don't quite understand what Bob is saying.
You can
So,
pick and choose.
and he's not
He can
alone.
pick or choose
I
as
mean,
he
he's
falls
not
within
alone.
two
There's
codes.
a
Oh.
number of these properties that would qualify initially as a seasonal resort. That's a lower rate than what this is probably likely going to be.
Can we leave that till the end and come back to it, possibly? It may
So-
not be as big an issue. as
Well,
we think.
could, Tilly, just clarification, is there anything wrong when making a choice? That's their business plan.
Well, the problem is if they're a seasonal resort and they cross 250 days, typically you would take that unit and change it to commercial. That's been the case for 20-some years. So like Cascade Lodge, he has 2 or 3 units that went over 250 days, they're commercial, and the rest of it's seasonal resort. Same with Lutzen Resort, they have a
Right.
couple that went over. So now what happens to the 3 units that go over 250 days? This creates uncertainty and a bit of a conflict. Unless they change that resort class to be 4+ units, you know? And that's why when you look at the residential, it says 1 to 3 and 4+.
Why
When you
don't
look
we
at
just
the-
leave it, if they exceed 250, they go to commercial?
Yeah.
Cause then I'm gonna have somebody in my office saying, no, I'm a short-term rental with 1 to 3 units.
But you,
How do I argue against that?
So change it 1 to 2?
I mean, you're
Can we
essentially
vote on it?
conflicting with something that's been in statute for over 20 years.
So you're saying going to 1 to 2 would alleviate this?
1 to 2 would alleviate conflict, it would alleviate overlapping classes.
Okay.
And if they have 3 units,
What'd you say, Molly?
What's that, Molly?
Is that class that, if I'm following, the class that you're saying could be confused with this one, isn't that also the class that has all those specific requirements?
yes,
right,
The resort
yes,
class?
yes.
So how could they, I mean, if they have all of those specific requirements, why are we concerned? Would they better fall into that classification?
the problem I see is that when somebody is classified as a seasonal resort and they cross over 250 days, by statute, you'd switch them to commercial, but they're gonna come in and say, I fit every definition of your 1 to 3 unit short-term rental. I advertise, I rent it short-term, and now I can rent it for 360 days, and I'm classed that way. So unless you match the rate, then unless the rate matches or is higher on this, then you don't have that potential.
I think when we get to the end, the rates will be very close. So we're talking about hypothetical that may solve itself if we go ahead. But I prefer that we at least leave it open to 1 to 3.
I'm looking at fair to everybody and impact on homestead taxpayers, and if it stays 1 to 3 and someone that should be commercial gets the lower rate, that is not fair to everybody. So
Well,
it doesn't
I
fit
guess
our
that
list.
is up to debate because we don't know what the rate's gonna be yet.
But it's not fair to everybody.
If the rate on that was higher, it would be.
We don't know because we don't know the rate. Yet.
Because you'd never get somebody coming in and arguing, well, I suppose it's lower than commercial though.
It's lower than commercial.
Right.
It's not fair
So
to
you're right.
everybody. Because
It creates a
other
bit of a-
taxpayers don't get to pick and choose.
It creates a bit of a unique situation, I think, when you look at it from, okay, so a 1 to 2 unit is obviously something less than a 3 unit. The 3 unit potentially qualifies as a resort. They already do. You know, Todd Miller is a seasonal resort. And if for some reason they don't meet the statutory definition and they have 3 units, maybe they are commercial. You know, at some point, you have a hotel. How many units does it take to be called a hotel? Right now in statute, it's 3 or more.
It's the
Four
same-
or more.
That's the same number of licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop.
So,
How do you know?
Is that helpful? I saw a commercial once.
That's because you started chewing.
Right. 1, 2?
In my opinion, the one to 2 units really clears up a lot of uncertainties and questions and contradictions in the system.
It also falls under not arbitrary. I am going to stick to that sheet.
Thank you.
It doesn't, it's not necessarily.
Making it 3 is arbitrary.
And making it 1 to 2 is not, we're making a decision one way or the other. I just want to leave it open to 1 to 3, in case there are unintended consequences. I'm concerned about someone like Todd falling in the cracks.
See, right now, he qualifies as a seasonal resort.
Jim wasn't finished, though.
No, I don't want to create complexities here.
No.
I just want to leave it open, so that we can look at it and say, well, maybe 1 to 2 is fine, but, you know, there are properties that could fall in the cracks.
Sure.
I'd love to consult with some folks about this.
Sure.
I had not thought of the hotel comparison. I don't think it's something we need to worry about, but I said no.
So at this point, I think we focus on what we agree on, and maybe we need to do more research on the impacts of that 1 to 3 versus 1 to 2. We agree on it's a short-term rental class. It's defined as rented for periods of less than 30 consecutive days, advertised as a short-term rental in the year previous to assessment. And then if we need to add some information about how many units there are, we probably need to get some clarity on that.
So you're gonna take off residential property?
I think we had residential property as well. Do we want to leave that?
I think you want to leave that.
Okay. So I think at this point, this 1 to 2 units versus 1 to 3 units is still an open question. Yeah?
Okay.
Okay.
Do we want to call it short-term residential rental or short-term rental residential?
Short-term residential rental.
I think everybody calls it short-term rental, so I don't know if we just
It
change the
makes
name.
sense to me that it would be short-term residential rental, that's what we're talking about.
Hawaii data classification, did somebody look up that?
Look up what?
Hawaii data classification for short-term rentals. Hawaii.
Okay, so we're short-term residential rental class. All right. So we have, more or less, we've said, we need a new class, this is what's going to be called. We've pretty much defined it, still an open question. Is that as far as we want to go? Or do we want to talk about a rate? We do, okay. Well, a recommended rate. You guys have recommended 1.25% tax rate. I think Bob has talked before about 1.5.
So at the meeting on the 6th, I provided 2 rates, and I was under the assumption that anything short-term rental would go to one of the 2 rates and not have that primary use. So we've done away with the 183. So now, I actually did make another slide or PowerPoint on, you know, from my 2-minute testimony, the practice testimony I gave down in St. Paul, essentially I went in and I said, hey, groups are looking for a middle ground. And what this initially came out to be was not the middle ground, it was just going right back to where they were before. So when I looked at the middle ground, what's from seasonal rec to commercial, I found what is splitting the difference, where is that number? And it's lower than 1.5, or it's higher than 1.5. 1.5 class rate results in a lower tax bill than the middle of those 2 classes.
No one has agreed that our goal is to split the difference, okay? No one has agreed that that's where we're going for, the midpoint between seasonal rec and commercial.
Yep, I agree with that statement. We haven't talked about that. I mean, that's going to be 2, right? That's the midpoint. So, so we know, I mean, it's for the sake of discussion, we know it's not as high as commercial, and we know it's something more than seasonal rec. Seasonal rec is 1.
Well, it's 1 on the first 500,000.
That'd be simple.
No, of course
It's
not.
1 on the first 500,000, then it goes to 1 1/4 over 500,000.
Okay, so it's 1 1/4 for a seasonal rec property that's not being used commercial. So,
No, it's not.
No.
I'm sorry.
It's 1 on the first $500,000, 1%.
right?
It's a tiered system.
Okay.
When your value is over 500,000, the value over 500,000 is taxed at 1.25.
So I would submit
Most.
most of those are under 500,000. So for most of them, it's 1%.
Okay. But some of them, it's 1.25.
Well,
No,
For all of-
only for the value above that 500,000.
Yeah.
So if you had a $600,000 house, 500,000 would be at 1% and 100,000 would be at
This is hard, I
1.25.
don't.
Yeah, it is
This
hard.
is why
An easier-
assessors get paid the big bucks.
An easier way to think, an easier way to think about it is, look at where they're taxed today. They're residential non-homestead. We know they can't stay there. The Department of Revenue said that, but that's 1.25. And the increase over what they were taxed at seasonal rate is roughly 15 to 20% over what they were taxed before, at 1.25, as compared with where they were at seasonal rate.
Yeah.
If you want additional food for thought, the increase in their local tax is much larger than
This is
15
easy
to
to
25. Huh?
Yeah.
No.
Continue, please.
The increase in their local tax, what they pay you, goes up a lot more than 15 to 20%. But because they also get taken out of the state general tax pool, the net is 15 to 20%. But they pay more. That's where the $300,000 in tax capacity came from. That's how much more these properties paid this year than they paid in 2019 when they were in seasonal rent. About $300,000.
Total.
Jim, you want a job in the assessor's office?
Funny enough.
Off topic.
No, it's not.
He is right, that is very right, that, you know, there was an increase in the local, a decrease in the state general, and the overall was what, 15 to 20%?
And the percent, I would really like to know it, but I haven't calculated the increase in the amount paid to you. It was more than 15 to 20, but I don't know what it was. But I'm guessing it's in the 33% range.
So let me ask a different question. If we left it at what you proposed, at 1.25, and given that we have an increased tax capacity from what we did last year, and we make a recommendation, it goes forward at 1.25 with this definition, what does that do to our tax capacity?
So if it was,
Let me finish. What does it do, and does that tax capacity then end up on residents' tax bills? Is there some shift then? That's what, I just want to understand that, because if it doesn't have an adverse effect on the county budget or on taxpayers having to pick up the slack, then I say, why are we even arguing this?
So
Can I
Rob
answer?
can answer that.
I'd like to hear both of your answers to see if they're the same.
If you went there, the taxes that the units pay would not, well, especially, I have to back up. You haven't heard our whole proposal yet.
so.
We would like these properties, we would like us to propose that these properties be excluded from the state general tax. And we have some reasons I can lay out for you. If you do that, their tax will not increase or decrease from what they're paying this year. The tax capacity you get will not increase or decrease from what they're paying this year. Bob won't have to do any more surveys. That's where we're at. It won't have any impact on what you collect, but it will exclude the requirement that the assessor's office do these yearly surveys that you want to avoid. It will do both of those things. So there will be absolutely no impact on the properties or on the county.
Okay, so excluding this, you're talking about excluding this class from being paid to the general tax.
Which is where they are today. They're not paying it this year.
Right. What do you think the odds that the legislature would adopt that?
Tom Bach already said that he doesn't want to shift the burden from one property to another, because what was presented to Tom Bach is that we were switching him to residential. I don't think he understood we'd already done that. And he said, oh, well, when you do that, you're going to shift all that state general tax burden to all the other ones. I don't want to do that. That was clearly something he said. But Jim is right in his analysis that if it's a 1 1/4 rate on all of these, if you don't separate out the resorts from the standalones, that yes, the county would not lose any capacity.
None.
So do we spell that out?
Well, I would.
Excuse me, so it would be just equalized?
Right.
There'd be no impact on homestead property owners?
Right, without
I
changing the
thought you
levy.
told us something different
Well, under this proposal, when it came the other
with
day.
the 180.
They were the 183 days, so everything was going back to seasonal rec. Plus, this says that they're changing out and separating the resorts from the standalones, which if the resorts go to the resort class, they would go back to essentially the seasonal rec class.
Okay, so this past year, we created, because of the, the decisions that have been made, not laying blame or anything, we had a shift in our homestead taxpayers, piece of the pie.
So essentially,
So
some of that
will
was
this
shifted.
correct that?
No, we didn't.
I think you're misunderstanding. What happened in 2019 was Todd changed all of the short-term rentals to residential, not homestead. What that did is raised their taxes
Right.
and lowered everyone else's.
Right.
So now, if you were to go back to seasonal rec, the exact opposite would happen.
Yeah, but
That-
what if
that-
you go to this?
Nothing happened.
If you went to this, everything would stay the exact same as what they were for 2019. It would not shift any burden, as long as you're not separating out the resorts to be taxed at a resort.
The reason that there was no shift in between 2019 and 2020 was that you also had a 6% levy increase. If you hadn't had that, there would have been some shift from homesteads onto this. But you did the 6%. What this allowed you to do was to do that 6%, which you needed to do.
Right.
I'm also on the Budget Advisory Committee, I know that, without an impact on most property owners.
Yeah.
So that allowed you to do what you needed to do without an impact on them. The only ones who paid for that, basically, are these seasonal rentals.
Well, and value increases. We had a lot of value increases
Okay,
that
sure.
also had an
That was
increase.
another,
Yeah.
there's one thing going on.
Yeah, vacant land, you did that as well.
So
Yeah.
I'm okay with this. My only concern is it not going in the general fund. I think that
I
would
think that
cause-
Tom Bach's gonna have that concern as well, and I think that, like you say, if we write something and put it forward, Tom Bach may very well just add that aspect back into it.
Can I was talking way more than 2 times.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't get only one voice.
I just wanted to clarify that it has no impact on homestead taxpayers.
Can I have some additional arguments for why I don't think these properties should be in the state general tax pool? Or actually, what I don't think is that we should be recommending that they are taxed in that, because it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything for Cook County. Another reason is that let me just read it. We represent businesses that are deeply and directly involved in managing short-term rental properties. They're quite concerned that the properties they manage will suffer serious harm from a 45% tax increase, which is what they will incur if we go at 1.25 and the state general tax and override levies. Those who manage homes and cabins fear that a great many more will be withdrawn from the rental market. Those who manage condos and townhomes are concerned that a 45% tax increase would make impossible. This is what Dennis was talking about the other day. By the way, we have some handouts that he sent around.
So should we write this language that it doesn't change the tax burden? And
Let me
that covers
finish.
Tom's concerns?
Those who manage condos and townhomes are concerned a 45% tax increase would make impossible the significant reinvestments needed to update those units and bring them back to a more rentable and saleable condition with an increased taxable value for the county. Their tax capacity is really, some of them, and I really would like to look at this list. Yeah. When the state general tax was enacted in 2001, it was applied to 2 quite specific property categories. And I have some background on that text if you'd like to read it. I love this stuff.
Lots of new items.
The two,
Yeah.
the
I'm
two
still with you.
specific property categories were commercial, industrial, and seasonal recreational. Those are the two categories. We proposed this new class would take short-term rental properties out of the seasonal rec category. Thus, it seems more fitting to us that these properties pay the local levy overrides than that they pay the state general tax. We benefit if they pay the local levy override. We do not benefit from the state general tax. And there are very few properties, if you look at the rate sheet, that pay both. We were tasked by Bach with crafting a proposal that Cook County business community and the Cook County board both could embrace as being in the best interest of our county.
So is this column on here, the one that says subject to state tax?
Yeah, you
Is
can
that
see
column?
that there's very few, and the ones at the bottom don't pay the local levy.
Okay,
There's
so
three
it's
rows.
not
So it's
necessarily
not out there.
a hard sell to say it's not subject to state tax.
It's also,
I think it kind of is a hard sell when,
Now I'm in an assumption, I just want to say, that's an assumption on both sides, okay? I just want to say that.
can I add where we would go with that? Again, let me read it. Will we get pushback? You can believe it. But another danger, and one that our folks worry about a lot, is that more powerful interests in St. Paul will want to push the short-term rental tax rate to 1.5. And that would be disastrous in terms of the tax burden on these properties. So by focusing the discussion around whether they're in or out of the state general tax, we're hoping we can avoid the pressure to increase the rates. So that's in our back pocket. Is
So you
this,
don't want it in the resolution necessarily.
we would recommend that the resolution say, we all endorse a new tax classification for CC1, short-term rental. The tax rate is 1.25%. The properties pay the local levy overrides. They are exempted from the state general tax.
so if I may point out, right now, they're either one of two things. They're either seasonal rec or commercial, right?
Those are the ones who pay the state general tax.
Those are the two classes that pay state general.
To
So
the tune of
under
almost
Department-
$900 million, so we're peanuts in this. I'm sorry.
You know, I don't know, I don't know if I have any more I can input on this conversation, like, you know, say, I mean, maybe it's best to remove the assessor, and, I mean, I certainly don't want my name to be tied to, you know, pulling it out of the state general fund. Tom Bach made it clear he wants it in the state general fund, and I feel like if I'm the one going down to testify on this, I have to truly believe that it is a solution. So, you guys are more than welcome to go testify on what you support. But what I'm hearing is that, my opinion, that if you're either seasonal rec or commercial, you pay into the state general fund. Right now, there's a primary use test, it's one of those two. When you go down to St. Paul and say, we're pulling these out of the state general fund, you're gonna get opposition from the Department of Revenue. They're more than 50% of this conversation. Cook County is a very small fraction of this conversation when you look at the big picture. They are the tax policy experts, and they're saying it's commercial. So the farther you get from commercial, the less likely you are. I think that the closer you get to commercial, the more likely you are to have them accept what was proposed. But obviously, that's an opinion.
It is, and I'm trying to look at this chart, trying to differentiate between. I figured it out. Actually, subject to state tax is mostly no's. However, commercial properties over 100,000 are yes, and seasonal rec is currently yes, a percentage of it. So,
And they have two different rates. There's a commercial state general rate and a seasonal rec state
Right.
general rate.
yeah.
It's much different, about 20%.
It's 20 and
For the
45.
seasonal, about 45 for the commercial.
So Brady, do you have any comments about this discussion that's specific to
I
this?
think it's going really well until now.
And especially on this point, as far as general,
Well, I don't have that background, but, you know,
Okay, well,
I
that-
take seriously what Bob says about what Tom Bach
Okay,
expressed
Um,
wants.
okay, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and so how, I mean, how do you think differently, or how do you think that'll be navigated?
If we go in
We-
saying yes to the general, we have nowhere to negotiate to or from. If we
Sure.
go in at this point, we're gonna be
Yeah.
able to go, okay, and that's what we're looking for.
I didn't know we were
Is
looking
the
at a negotiating
opportunity-
approach.
Well,
We have to negotiate.
we have to negotiate,
So they want to come in low and have flexibility.
right?
And can I add on the Bach piece is, as we were working on this yesterday, and by the way, Bob, we testify every year, and Judy's been in that building for 33 years, so we know how this works. And so she texted Tom, and Tom's reaction was, well, the state chamber may not like this. But actually, he didn't understand that that's changed. The only ones that would be affected, the shift will be only within the cabins. It doesn't affect the commercial property at all. I mean, and so I went back to Judy and I said, can you explain to Tom that we're not trying to be belligerent here, but we're trying to position ourselves with some negotiating room so that we have something we can give if we need to avoid going to 1.5%, which we think would be disastrous. And she said yes. That makes a lot of sense.
So Jim and Linda, so you're saying whatever we agree on here, if we do, that you will negotiate on when you go down and meet with Tom?
We'll go down with the resolution in hand, and that's what
What's
we will
this
be promoting.
negotiations you're talking about?
Well, it's not, it's lobbying. It's a lobbying effort.
Okay.
So we visit with
So
our leaders.
if we bring something forward and agree on something, you know, at a board meeting, that we could approve this, are we giving you a license to go down and negotiate with that? Or lobby? Go ahead, I'm asking the question.
In a sense, in a sense, yes. But it's only because if Tom agrees to put this forward, and then Judy takes it to the reviser of statutes and gets the language drawn up so that he can introduce it as a bill, then it becomes fair game for everyone. And so the question would become, how much standing do we have if the state chamber, with whom we have really no relationship because we're so different in our values, wanted something else, or if the more likely would be the cabin owners, which has been a very powerful lobby. That's why they're exempt from override levies, for example. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know where they're going to come out. Should we check with you and see if any compromise is agreeable to you? Absolutely. But we lose control of it once it goes into legislation. That's all we're saying.
So from a board perspective, the resolution should represent what the board agrees with. Knowing
Yes.
full well that once it gets in the hands of a bunch of legislators, it can take on a life of its own. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the board shouldn't send what they support.
Well, and Heidi, you had your hand up.
So I know from my history in trying to get this done years ago with the same people in office, and coming from the negotiating side, I'm pretty sure they're not gonna agree without something in the general tax. And God only knows they'll make it some tiered program that you love, Jim. But again, I wanna go to the language of it doesn't change where we're at right now. It changes where we were before, which our legislators may not know because they're not up to date on it, but it doesn't change our tax capacity of where we're at now.
If it's
I'm
1
comfortable
1/4,
with it, yeah.
If it's 1 1/4 on
It's
all
one-
properties.
Yeah.
So I guess, from my standpoint, does anybody have any other questions about the rate and capacity and how it affects the county?
I got one more question just on that referendum market value. Have we made an assumption on that?
I think they're including it in
That we
the,
would-
he's calling it the override.
In fact, I
That's
think
the
that we would,
That's
the
it, that's
definition
the
of
levy.
override.
we would want to argue that it's more important to Cook County that these properties pay the referendum mark, the levy override,
Mhm.
than that they pay the state general tax. And we were charged with putting together the best possible proposal to serve the best interests of the people of Cook County.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, Bob, your concern is that this won't fly without that, but the angle that we might want to proceed with is that if we go for our ideal, we might get close to it. Is that,
My fear, or what I'm concerned about is that, number one, I have to support, if I'm gonna testify on something, I
Yeah.
have to support it.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't matter if it's from the
Yeah.
Cook County support or if it's from the Association of Assessors.
okay?
But right now, there's counties that are changing all these to commercial. So you have to, I think that we're looking up too much and not looking down and saying, where is this compromise being made? I mean, essentially, if we want to do what's best for Cook County, let's put the rate at 5% on every property in Cook County and send it down to St. Paul and see if it passes. We all know that won't pass. We
Well,
wouldn't do
that's
that.
not the best for everybody in Cook County.
Well, so, no, I don't understand,
But yes,
So-
there is concern from my part that, I've talked with the Department of Revenue enough that they feel like these are, so here's the deal. Let
Yeah.
me just completely change gears here.
okay?
When somebody doesn't agree with something, they take it to court. This has already been to court. Court said it's
Oh,
commercial.
McLeod.
So the next step is the the Court of Appeals, and then the Supreme Court if they see it's a big enough issue.
Okay,
This has already been to court, and court said it's commercial.
well,
So going down to St. Paul with such a low expectation and not expecting the Department of Revenue to bring that to the attention of the legislatures, I think you're just hopeful or it's naive to think that they wouldn't.
that's idealistic.
I like that word better.
But, and I am naive too, but, that court decision was based on there only being two options. And so with a third, right, commercial or
No,
seasonal
So
rec?
they, in the decision, they looked at seasonal rec, residential and commercial.
Okay, well, okay, but if there's a new option, that's a whole different ballgame.
But,
If
so
it
this isn't saying, hey, there is this new option, this is saying we want there to be a new option.
Right.
And the Department of Revenue would likely go right in there and say, hey, there's no need for this new class, the tax court's already said it's commercial.
Well,
It's up to the legislators.
let's let that work itself through.
Right.
Well, I'm just trying to say that we don't want to set ourselves up for failure, because what I see happening, if something doesn't pass this session, I think you want to go in with your best offer. Any real estate agent will say, bring your best offer up front. But if you don't bring your best offer next year, you might have a whole different direction of how these get classified. You might have tax court cases that clearly define it. You might end up losing big time in the long run.
Can I ask you a question? Specific to you, when you say that you go testify, are you doing that of your own free will?
I was gonna do it if the board supported. I mean, if the
Okay,
board doesn't
so
support.
this is where I would come from as a community, and this is the process that we're working through today. There's a meeting in the middle, if you will. So there's a group of people that are gonna go down, and we're gonna do our lobbying efforts on March 18th, and we're gonna, hopefully come together as a Board of Commissioners on this resolution. And I think with that, it's really important that either you don't step up, because if you don't have to, you don't have to necessarily agree on all this, but you don't have to be the person in front of the crowd either. So I would step back and go, you know what, I can't do that this year. I can't be that assessor. I have to support my community, I have to support this
So
list.
Linda, it's very likely that if something comes forward that MAO has a position on, that they only trained two people this year to go down and testify. I may very well be the person to go and testify against this.
But the one other thing that we didn't put up,
I'll let you do that.
we
I was
did,
gonna say, doesn't the board decide if he gets to testify against our decision?
we did not also want to come in today and negotiate with Bob. We wanted to have a conversation with the county board.
Yes, and
Technical, he's brilliant, But we don't want to negotiate
I agree.
policy with them.
I agree.
So I'll remove myself right now. I mean, you guys understand what 1 1/4 means, you understand what 1 1/2 means. I mean, I can step away from this conversation right now, and I will take the same approach that every other assessor in the state's taking,
Which is,
to step away from this.
Oh, well, I guess I had another question for you, if that's okay, and it's regarding the testimony, or potential testimony, and this resolution. I mean, based on what we've talked about, you don't think our ideal ask is likely to pass, and so does that mean you would testify against it?
Well, no, and I don't know how the board or whatever can influence. I mean, if the Association of Assessors, they could find someone else if they're gonna testify against it.
Sure. But I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know why you wouldn't support it.
yeah,
Even though it's
Well, I mean,
shooting for the stars or
I would
whatever.
support it. The reason why I say that pulling it out of the state general fund is not a good idea, because I can tell you that's going to bring some opposition.
Yeah, and I think they anticipate,
This whole
You know.
thing is full of opposition.
right.
Right
It's
from the
anticipated,
get-go.
but it's just, and I appreciate bringing the best offer, because that makes a lot of sense too, but I can also appreciate bringing some wiggle room, so I'm just
Right.
trying to weigh
And
that.
part of my concern was like
or
what Myron said.
anticipating that you're gonna have to have
And-
some wiggle room.
Yeah, anticipate the need to compromise or
Yeah.
whatever.
So I'm gonna get us back here, because we're at the time that we've set aside today. I'm
7
perfectly
o'clock?
willing to go.
Oh.
I'm perfectly willing to go longer, at least into, before happy hour's done.
Can we give it 15 minutes and see if we can finish it?
But I want to just, we got our whereases, and I think we can fine tune those. And we said, so therefore, we would recommend a short-term rental class defined as blah, 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 residential property, want to figure that out some more. And that, we've all agreed on. I don't know, do we need to further put into the resolution the stuff about not the general tax, or not this or that? The board will agree with you up to this point, and that's a starting place. Do you want to try to add more and get through that? Do you see what I'm saying?
I don't think Bach will support it if it doesn't have a solution in it.
Well, I mean, and we have the 1 1/4, and we say that piece, but do we need to further add those other pieces? And board members, you're going to be the ones that have to decide, can you support that?
Well, I'll just respond. I would have to better understand. I've been in negotiations and lobbying, and it doesn't make me know I have the answers, but I know from experience that is a process into and on itself.
Right.
And if I'm going to agree to something, there's got to be some parameters. It can't be, go for it.
Go forth and lobby.
I mean, I'm sorry, but I think we owe the public more than that.
And Myron, if I can, there's no one here from the public addressing their concerns about this, but I have emails from people that are saying that, they feel these things should be taxed at a rate that reflects their income. So that is something that is valid.
But once again, there's a whole bunch of assumption in who's talking to you, because it is complicated and it's not understood in all those nooks and crannies. And I'm just making that assumption myself, that these are not people that are like
Well,
understanding tax laws.
For example, Linda, if the board didn't take a position and these went to commercial, that would benefit all the taxpayers of Cook County.
I'm interested in hearing what else Myron has to say on
Yeah.
the guidance with lobbying.
My experience in lobbying, and I don't have all the answers, and I haven't done it for 20 years, or negotiating, and had a lot of experience with that, that the interested parties, the stakeholders in that process, and I think this is pertinent to the situation, need to know and understand the parameters of what we're willing to accept. Isn't that fair?
Yeah, I'm not clear where you're going.
I'm not either, but I also want to
Okay.
correct the last statement, because when you say that a commercial class will benefit all the taxpayers, you can't just say all the taxpayers, because there is a ton of lodging property owners that are going to crumble. So, like, when you say that, a commercial class benefits all the taxpayers. Random statement. Person who doesn't understand it's gonna go, yeah, everybody do commercial. It doesn't take into account this conversation around the middle ground,
Okay.
right?
Well, and there are,
Right?
I think
That it's not entirely true. I suppose if you said it would benefit all the other taxpayers, it would.
Exactly.
And that's not even true
and
necessarily.
that's not necessarily true in the long run. And that's, I mean, there are impacts to any decisions that are made. There are impacts, good or bad. And if you create something that taxes people at a much higher rate, and those people take their stuff out of the market, or they leave Cook County, and then maybe over 5 years, there's a different kind of impact in the county as well.
Exactly.
So I think balance is really important here, both long-term and short-term. And what I think we're trying to do today is get to a definition that is more sustainable and clearer and cleaner. And I feel like we have done that. I'm not certain about these last elements you put in because frankly, I don't understand them. But I think we can meet again and maybe look at those in some more detail, or we can go with what we have and send that around and look at it again and say, do we need to meet again? I'm open here to the next steps.
I think if I could just respond to your question and then just leave it, I'll try it again. I think as a commissioner, it would be important to me that if the understanding is you're going to take this resolution and then bring it forward to a process subject to lobbying and negotiations, which is subject to change. I think the interested parties, such as the county, should have some kind of input on what are the parameters for what we could agree to in that process. Otherwise, I don't want to go down that road. And so whenever I've been involved in these things, there's always usually the vested interest of the major party, which is the Cook County here, has to have an understanding of where would this negotiations go, what is the goal, and what are the impacts. I'm just reluctant to say, go ahead and we can agree with this resolution and then go down and negotiate or lobby. I'm not, am I confusing
Molly
things?
has something she's trying to say.
Yeah.
Molly?
I don't mean to interrupt you, Commissioner Bersheimer, but I have a response, I think, to
Good.
what I believe your concerns are. When we put forth this resolution, when the board votes on it, this is our indication of what Cook County Board wants. And that's what Bach is asking for. I think we underestimate his sophistication if he sees the face of Visit Cook County and the chamber as all of Cook County. I mean, the reason he's asking for this resolution is he wants to know what we want. And he's not going to make a decision or push forward legislation which he believes would be outside of our resolution without an understanding that, okay, I have to answer now to the people of Cook County. I'm not sure if I'm getting across my point, but I don't think that Linda and Jim are asking for the authority to negotiate on behalf of all of Cook County. They walk there to the legislature with this resolution in hand and they say, here's what the Cook County Board wants. Here are our interests from our special interest groups, and the legislature has to come up with something that's going to satisfy everyone, or they don't get voted in the next session. That's representative government. We can also send somebody with them if we want.
And we would more than happily pledge that, as you know, as we all know, the sausage making machinery in St. Paul is chaotic. But if there are clear points at which a choice is presented, we will pledge on whatever you require that we consult you on that. Our whole purpose is not to put something over on you. And if it helps in terms of what we're proposing, consider this, it's exactly the same tax policy you have in place this year for these properties. Exactly. It's like we took the tax from the residential non-homestead and transported it into a new class. That's all we're doing. Nothing changes from what you have in effect this year. Nothing.
Except for, it's just automatic in that, if it's that definition and not based on a property use, that's the difference.
The practical effects, right?
Todd, and, well, one point I didn't emphasize, this is where Bob went first when he was challenged with finding a new home. He wrote a whole paper on it. This, what we're proposing is where he said they should be.
Yes, sir.
So I think the word negotiate on our behalf becomes scary. I don't like not having the state general tax because I know how our legislators feel. But we are coming in saying, as we write it, that this keeps us equal to where we are now. And what we're saying is we will take no less than this. And in the negotiation, they may have to give more. We won't get less. The state general fund might get something, but we still won't get less. Nothing will change for us.
You don't
So
have
that's
anything
where
at-
I'm okay with it.
You don't have anything at risk. Nothing.
We do and we don't. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like it may not pass,
Well,
but I feel that this is the same as where we are today. This is what they're already paying. And the negotiation is gonna hit you, not us.
I would,
mean-
can I? The negotiation isn't we or us, it's all of us.
It
and That's
is.
why we're at the table. And then secondly, the crippling factor is that move to commercial. We have to start somewhere over here. Because if that checkbox gets, and it's all commercial like is happening in Lake County, that's where I'm gonna bring in the passion that I brought to the table on Tuesday morning. Because we can't say, oh, wow, what's gonna happen? It will change the economic structure of Cook County. 3, 5, 10 years. It will change what we have up here. And that's our tourism.
That's what I'm saying, but for us as commissioners, I have to say we and us so they understand where the different levels are.
Okay.
I mean, we just have to explain in different terms. I would vote for it. I feel uncomfortable with it, you know how I feel, but we're not sending you to negotiate down from where we are and to impact all the taxpayers negatively.
our position also is respectful in an appropriate way, I believe, of the people who actually do this business. They're very concerned that a 45% tax increase from seasonal rates, which is what it will involve if the state general tax is in there, will really, really hurt.
Here's my concern, if we put that we want to include the general state tax, in the negotiations, they could ask for more. They could ask for 1.5.
Well, that's our great worry.
Right, but by leaving that language out, I mean, there's wiggle room, which is a bad term to use for.
But you shouldn't be under misapprehension. Leaving the state general tax out is our preferred position. In 2001, when they enacted the state general tax, they made a bargain with the cabins. We'll exempt you from the local levy overrides and you pay the general tax. We're saying we don't like that. We think that they ought to keep the money here and pay the levy overrides and not pay into the state.
We're only saying we're not these.
Sorry.
No, so if we, I mean, aside from strategy, if we could get this passed, that'd be awesome.
Well, yeah,
right?
No
I
one
mean-
would disagree that if you could do away with state general on any category, it would be a good thing for the
It's a
county.
horrible tax. The state is appropriating the only revenue source you have got for its own purposes. It should never have
Sure.
been enacted, but I'm not even gonna go there. Forget I said that.
You did. It's on
You're not the
camera.
only one saying that.
It's on video.
All of our strategy is on video.
Pretty sure.
Comes to our
Yeah,
work.
yeah.
You're not the only one saying that. I hear that oftentimes, even in the assessment world.
So should we tackle that?
No.
No, I think we should,
No.
I think we should write this language in and be done with it.
Which language? Hey, should I read what I have? I did.
Okay?
Oh, kinda. Whereas the Department of Revenue's memo has created uncertainty in the short-term rental market, whereas the short-term rental market is a significant part of Cook County's tourism economy, whereas tourism is the single largest part of Cook County's economy, whereas the current Minnesota property tax system did not contemplate the short-term rental of residential properties, whereas Department of Revenue has given county assessors wide latitude in determining primary use, whereas the Cook County County Board wishes to find a solution that is fair for all property owners, whereas the Cook County Board has worked with the Cook County Chamber of Commerce, therefore the significance of short-term residential rental properties require a separate class of taxation, and therefore short-term residential rentals are defined as rented for periods of less than 30 consecutive days, advertised as short-term rental in year previous, and fewer than 3 or 4 units and what else?
Do we have to put the rate of 1.25 in there?
I
Yes.
think you do have to
Yes.
clarify, and you have to clarify that that would be a local,
Are my
With a
therefores?
local tax
a
rate of
local
one-
class rate.
A local class
And,
rate.
Maybe now say-
and the, what is it, MVR or whatever it is?
That's a referendum market value.
Maybe
Oh,
now is
sorry.
where you say, and because of these things, la-da-da, this is what's the proposal for the tax rate.
What is that?
Referendum
Three-letter,
market value.
MVR.
NVR?
Referendum
Oh,
market
referendum
value.
market value? Is that what you're saying?
R
RMB.
M V.
Referendum.
RMB.
RMV. I just need a lot of help with all that language. I have local class rate 1.25 and RMV. What do I say about it?
Up there.
Is our recommendation.
I think Linda said la-di-da. I'm not.
Yeah.
I didn't say la-di-da. Did I say la-di-da?
And so I should say,
And subject to RMB tax, and exempted from state general tax. Please.
Local class rate of 1.25.
Subject to RMB tax and exempt from state general tax.
But before that, don't we have to put in there the Cook County
Something.
Board recommends that?
yeah, I'm not sure that my therefores are appropriate. Should I continue with whereases before the therefores?
Yes, and therefore the Cook County Board recommends to
Hey,
the,
Tim's.
to the state legislature that it enact a new class, blah, 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 or something like that. What a cutie.
Just a dolly.
Therefore, the Cook County
Attorney Hicken,
Board-
thanks so much for taking time from your vacation. And-
Dave will send this to you to mark up.
Therefore, the Cook County Board.
We're gonna meet again before we finalize this. Right?
Yes, I was just
Yeah,
going
how
to
about
say
Mondays?
that our next board meeting is the 11th.
Right.
So if we can kind of write this up, circulate it around, then I'll probably organize something before the 11th. Maybe next week I'll try and we can get back
That
together
would be
again
really
and
good.
That'd be
review a
great.
copy and do that final.
Do you want to try pick a day now or no?
I would prefer,
Okay.
Because we have to post it.
Oh, that's true.
I'm still,
So Wednesday's
how-
probably
when-
no
When is the
good.
earliest we can do it then? Wednesday?
Tuesday. Well,
No.
no, because you need 3 days.
Wednesday or Thursday.
All right. We're looking Thursday.
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 Thursday, the 6th? I'm free
yeah,
after.
we're in Two Harbors on the 5th,
Yes, we are.
so,
Afternoon of the 6th, possibly?
I'm
Six.
open then.
That's amazing.
Wide open.
I could do
Yep.
morning but it has to be afternoon.
For me, it
It has
does.
to be afternoon.
Okay.
So it'd have to be after 3. There's a meeting in here from 1 to 3.
Molly.
We don't have
get
to be
going.
here.
Well, I do
Time to go
because it's
skiing.
retirement.
Where are you?
Someplace better than this.
I'm at Lac de Flambeau near Minocqua in Wisconsin.
Lac de Flambeau.
Way to get all these
Sounds
words right.
fancy.
Sounds French.
They got fancy.
Okay, can
wallpaper
we,
there.
who else is meeting here?
Soil and Water meets in this room from 1 to 3.
And
Can
is
they
that
meet somewhere
taped?
else?
Can we meet that?
We can also meet the ITV.
ITV?
And that-
You
that'll
all
be-
can meet somewhere else.
We're
I
reasonably
was
small.
supposed to be in St. Paul on Thursday and Friday, and I am not going to St. Paul because of the soil and water meeting. So I will be in the soil and water meeting.
Well, we
And I
can fill
guess-
you out for short term.
Yes.
This is not gonna be long.
That's what I was
How
trying
about
to say.
3? How does 3 look?
So, excuse me, could we meet here and Soil and Water meet in there, or do they need video?
They use video.
Molly will be back, so we will, oh, we need
We have to
video for
stream.
the public meeting.
Yeah.
yes.
Do you guys want me there? I'm just providing info at this point. Class rates,
How about,
capacities.
how about you have it on there as tentative,
Okay.
and,
Can we set it for 3 and you can talk to soil and water? Can we set it for 3 and you talk to soil and water, and if they can't, if they need to use the screen, then we just.
I have no
stream it?
input anymore.
No, we need to
We get a
stream.
stand-up camera. It's not in our policy.
Yeah,
Yeah, I really appreciate
yeah.
your,
I think-
your input, because,
I think there's a big representation that isn't being considered here. In the fact that they would be commercial under the Department of Revenue's guidance and what that means to other taxpayers.
But after this is written, it goes in the board packet for approval, and people have the opportunity to comment. So
Right.
they're not being excluded.
Well, let's try to, so 3 o'clock would be safe then
Yep.
for everything, to keep everyone.
I'm free till 4:30.
Perfect.
We can get her done by
I'll be in my office.
Thanks, Bob.
And soil and water.
Yeah, I
may
think it'd be
able to move
important to
over
be
there,
here.
because they can hook into that screen. We don't
Oh.
stream anyone in, we just use the screen for
This would be
PowerPoints.
more about us being able to stream.
Right, so that could be used over there.
So we're gonna go,
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Paul.
you.
Thank
so
you.
3 o'clock on Thursday.
Have fun. Break legs. No, don't do that. I'll be right back. I just need
So-
to turn the stream. I'll be right back.
Thank God. I was trying to take notes of what everyone was saying.
Well, thanks for all your work on this, Linda and
So for
Jim.
time, Jim is called.
You know,